Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Safe and Sound, the Print's new limited episode series on well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic, presented by Facebook. My name is Sandhya Ramesh, and I am the science editor here at the Print. We have two guests with us here today to speak about lifestyle changes induced by the pandemic. Ms. Ishi Khosla is a clinical nutritionist who practices out of Delhi. She is also a researcher, author, entrepreneur, and a welfare worker. Dr. Srinivas Rajkumar is a psychiatrist from AIIMS who specializes in working with child, adult, and addiction psychiatry. Thank you both for being here with us today. Ms. Ishi, may we start with you? When we talk about lifestyle changes that are brought about by this pandemic, what are the first few things that come to your mind, especially as an expert in health and nutrition?
First of all, thank you for having me. And yes, the pandemic has brought with it some really unusual patterns and behaviors among people and what they're doing with their lives. And this is a global phenomena. It's not only restricted to our country. And I think what any stressful situation brings with it is a fear and a sense of anxiety. So the first thing that one notices is that we have manifestations in eating behavior when it comes to coping with these situations. So whenever there is stress or fear or hopelessness and uncertainty, all of that put together, initially nobody had realized or expected something like this to hit so hard, and with nothing, in terms of solutions or nothing in terms of hope. At the end of the day, it's seemingly like an unending phenomena. And today we are talking about the vaccines, and people are kind of feeling a little better. But when it all started, it was a complete situation of an unknown entity and unknown future. With that, there was reality also of losses in business, in personal jobs, and all of that resulted in sleep issues, and people were getting such severe anxiety, physical manifestations of anxiety. So both, whether it was eating behavior or sleep, and in general, what was happening was there was a lockdown, and there was also a confinement and a feeling of being trapped, literally. So physical activity was brought down. So there was no release of energy, or people who were going for exercises and morning walks and all of that. So comfort eating started. People started eating much more in terms of sweets, and that's what happens typically when you are stressed. You eat more sugar, carbohydrates, and late night eating. People were watching films to entertain themselves and eating late night snacks, and the whole shift in the circadian rhythm, which brought with it certainly unhealthy health effects. And so I think that has certainly been a reality. At the other side of the spectrum, I also noticed that that was a time when when people began to feel the pinch of all of that, and started, the scale started going the other way. The body started swelling, and you generally don't feel good about yourself, and that also became an opportunity to make differences in your lifestyle. And so, because the work pressures in many people went down, the commute, the time available was much more. So people started, I think, focusing more on things like losing weight and correcting their diets, and making those changes and exercising within the house. And for instance, people who were going to the gyms never thought they could be exercising at home, but online classes began, and the trainers and the instructors started doing things which were unheard of. But yes, online classes became a reality. So I have seen the pattern emerge in a way which is today, I would say, an opportunity rather than a negative. And the third aspect is when we talked about COVID, and the immunity angle, we have really not worried too much about our immune system. So far, always the conversations around health and diet are about weight loss and about managing your cholesterol and diabetes and a few other things. But today, diet and immunity, the correlation, the link between the two became far more important. So that again is a trend which has happened. It's sad that we needed a COVID or a pandemic to wake us up, but certainly this thing has also happened. So it's not all bad news.
So are you hopeful that now that people are just cooped up at home, there's nothing to do except learn new things on the internet. So are you hopeful that people are now sort of getting out of this vicious cycle of not knowing, when we're going to go back to normal, and then losing track of day and night and the circadian rhythm, like you said, eating at random hours of the day, and now sort of slowly developing a sense of discipline and understanding that this is something that is, at least in the short term, is going to be with us for a while? Are you hopeful that people are themselves coming out of that sort of mental rut and helping themselves?
I think so. To some extent, yes. I may not agree that everyone is, because I do see a lot of casual and irresponsible behavior still with people. But to a large extent, there is a rhythm which is coming in their functionality, and beginning to accept this as a new normal, as they say. And I think yes, there is an acceptance of a new way of living and a new way of thinking and a new way of doing things. And whether it's professionals like us, or offices and institutions and multinational companies, they're all sort of beginning to accept this as something which is going to be here for a bit with its impact, and trying to adapt to the new situation. Certainly.
Dr. Srinivas, what has been your experience since the beginning of the pandemic? What are you seeing in patients, and what do you think are the biggest lifestyle changes that the pandemic has brought about, which we're struggling to deal with today?
So India was among the few countries which had a very harsh lockdown. So that created difficulty for patients in terms of access to health, and even common people about even going on with their daily life. So across all the age groups, be it children, adolescents, middle-aged males and females, and even elderly, across all the age groups, they had problem coping up with this new situation. The main problem we felt was even family members, when they started to spend more time together, there was actually difficulty managing time, managing their habits, and how to spend more time together, which they were not even used to. Even there was increase in incidents of domestic abuse. There were few cases where children were beaten up by their parents, and abuse of spouse, and all these incidents were happening. And adding to that, this misinformation which was spreading through WhatsApp and other viral social media created added trouble. Like, people did not know what to do, how to react to the situation. There was even ostracization of health workers, and there was like widespread mismanagement, at least in the initial part, but which kind of settled over time. And there were helplines available to provide valid information. So that kind of like eased up the initial situation. And the lockdown was continually extended for multiple times. So companies or even offices did not know how they are going to employ the workers, how they are going to keep them involved, and how to kind of continue the productivity of their companies. So all these instances, and most the vulnerable group, that is people with mental illness, had difficulty even accessing their medications in the initial part. And in addition, people who were using alcohol had serious withdrawal reactions in the initial part, because the supply of alcohol immediately stopped and there was no access to medications for the treatment of withdrawal symptoms, or access to the substance, that is the alcohol. So they had severe withdrawal reactions and they landed up in the emergency. So over time, the government understood that it was important at least to open up the liquor shops and also simultaneously provide access to treatment. So things kind of eased up after the initial time, but still, even today, we feel that access to health is difficult. You will find people who don't know whether they would be able to avail emergency beds in case the person worsens, because the home care had kind of made it a very difficult situation for people who have limited influence in the social circles to actually get an hospital bed. So it is difficult for people across different strata. They had a different set of problems to face. But this crisis also provided an interesting opportunity for people to know about mental health, to know about how to spend more time together, how to balance the priorities, and the additional time, as she also mentioned, about how to make better use of this crisis. So there are always like good and bad aspects of any event. So even though COVID is a very catastrophic event which has happened in our lifetimes, it also provided us with interesting opportunities to connect with the loved ones, at least through phones and through impersonal means of communication. But the negative side is about lack of physical contact, at least for children, and lack of physical interaction, which can have like long lasting impact on their development. And we don't know when the schools are going to have regular classes, how will they play, about their social development and about their education. So it's still concerning about how things are going to transpire. And again, India is a country with limited access to health services. Always we are on a poorer side of the ratio, be it doctors to patients, or even at least psychiatrists. Availability is like too low for the population. So we have like few per lakh of population. So it's very difficult, and we have to find newer means, newer avenues to kind of navigate this situation.
Right. You mentioned a couple of interesting things. One is that people are both forced to live with people at close quarters as well as be isolated. And the other thing you had also mentioned about alcohol. And I do want to touch upon those a little bit later. But for now, I would like to go back to Ms. Ishi and speak about sleep and food. You had mentioned that these are the first few habits to sort of get disrupted when we're exposed to extreme amounts of stress, both sleep disruption as well as our dietary habits. As individuals, how can we keep an eye out for sleep disruption and irregular eating?
The impact is on the next day in terms of your productivity, your efficiency. You become irritable, your body has not rested, and you've also eaten at the wrong hour. So it's like a disturbance of the entire rhythm, and manifests in eating more, like you have more cravings, there is an insulin imbalance, there is a higher level of cortisol, lower level of melatonin, which both of them are completely they are disruptive to our health and increase the inflammation in the body, which means that your entire hormonal balance gets upset. So you are more hungry, you're craving more, and you're more irritable, and you're more, I would say, restless and more anxious. So, that the cycle kind of just kicks in, because the more anxious you are, the more you start looking for a quick fix. And I have a diabetic patient who said, I've been managing my sugars very well. I haven't eaten any meat, but the day I feel very stressed for some reason, or, got some bad news from somewhere, or, it has brought in so many, casualties with this crisis. So she says, if I get a bad news or something which is stressing me out, I just tell my driver to go and get a sandesh. And that day I eat. And then I'm okay. Otherwise, I'm not eating anything. So, these even patients are aware of this connection that, that sweet is going to make them feel happy. And likewise, yesterday there was a patient. He said, I'm going through a divorce. We're talking about relationship issues, and this time has brought it really in the face. So he said, I didn't follow everything because at night, somewhere with my divorce proceedings, I'm getting very stressed, and I have a full bottle of Coke and dark chocolate, and you told me to eat 2 pieces of dark chocolate. I finished the bar, and allow me that till my court case is sorted out. So please, so it is real. The correlation is real, and people tend to cope negatively, whatever you can say. There are physiological reasons why this happens. So So it's like a vicious cycle, and you do see these behaviors coming in, and then therefore the diabetes, people who are diabetic, they get their blood sugars go off completely out of control. High blood pressures have been seen to be highly disturbed during this time, and like alcohol withdrawal is also one of the things which has happened. And on the other side is too much of alcohol. Then people start drinking more, and these addictive components in food, which we also know apart from these basics, we're talking about sugar, etc. Sugar is addictive, we know, but things like processed food, which a lot of additives are added, so these are addictive when you seek junk food and processed food. And wheat also has something called gluteomorphine, which stimulates the opioid centers just the way drugs do. So you go out to eating more of these kind of, you reach out to these foods. And so these addictive components so there is a whole endocannabinoid system, which Dr. Srinivas would be aware of, which needs to be fed and get stimulated, and then you kind of reach out to these negative foods. And the behaviors then, these, even the people who are on medication require more medication, and they're not going out to doctors, and they're not going out to meeting. So it's a kind of a cycle which kind of gets into a concentric, one thing leading to the other, So I think we have seen it all. I have seen patients going through each one of these crises, and the introduction of sleeping pills in people who have no history of sleep issues, etc. So it's like a prolonged jet lag. When you don't have enough melatonin and all of that, it's a pretty sad situation. But once one individual gets these wake up signals that, hey, I'm putting on weight, or I'm getting a belly, or my sugars are not under control, or my blood pressure is not under control, or my skin is looking terrible, I'm doing something really wrong with my food and my diet and my lifestyle, then the correctives also begin to, the need for correctives begins to be understood. And a lot of people are doing it. I mean, they are making that difference. And support is now available as against earlier.
Right.
To everyone, all mental health professionals are also seeing patients online. And like I said, physical trainers are available, and nutrition apps are available. So all that is happening now.
And is this it sounds like a vicious cycle, because things are upsetting around us. We tend to eat processed foods or sugars or anything that make us feel good. And then we crave for more of those. Is there a way to break out of the cycle without reaching that levels of extreme guilt that people typically do? Because we do tend to associate eating unhealthily with negative effects to the body, and then feeling guilty. But can we also include other things along in our daily life, such as exercise and things like that, to sort of just compensate for unhealthy habits a little bit?
They can be broken very easily. I mean, if you know what to do, what not to do, exercise is a great way of getting in the endorphins and the feel-good factors. And exercise is one, meditation is the other. Mind control. And just the other day, a patient of mine, again, a real food addict, she's a teacher, and she just gave up her diet one fine day when she was doing very well. And she said, I don't think I can live this kind of lifestyle, so I better just stop it. But then somewhere, she said, I decided to do meditation, and just a few days of meditation, and she has again contacted me, and she says, I want to do the diet now. So I said, I think the meditation has helped you. She says, I think so, because I feel like I'm centered and I can deal with it. So yes, mind control. And there are again physiological reasons for why one feels like that. Meditation kicks in certain hormones which have a positive effect. So certainly, yes, yoga, meditation, and exercise have a whole place to occupy here. And of course, the right kind of diet, which means you remove certain unhealthy components from your diet, which include, may not be a radical removal, but certainly a substitution, an alternative for sugar, cut down on sugars, cut down on processed food, cut down on unnecessary carbohydrates, focus more on vegetables and fruits, and good fats. Good fats have a huge role to play here, which we tend to shun, thinking that, oh, this is fatty and this is going to make my be counterproductive, which is actually a false or a myth, which continues to be, which is why I'm talking about it, because people, no matter how much you tell them that fats are good for you, they still are scared of eating, their butters and their ghees and their coconuts. And so saturated fats are of the right kind are actually desirable for the mind, particularly, your coconut oil has a positive effect on your gut. And today we know that the gut and the brain are connected. There is what we call a gut-brain axis, and if we, which is mediated, all of this is mediated through the gut flora. So if we eat the right food and we feed the gut flora, we can have positive effect on our brain and control our brain. So eating the right kind of food, eliminating the wrong food, and eating at the right time, a bit of fasting, a bit of detoxification, all of that put together can bring your behaviors back.
Dr. Srinivas, like Ms. Ishi mentioned, when we do indulge in these kinds of habits, which for the most part is out of our control, I think it is safe to say that these are not things that we can exert too much self-control on when we're exposed to a lot of stress. So when we are eating unhealthily, when we're not sleeping well, it does also mentally affect us. And of course, that's a cycle that leads us to eat more unhealthily and, be less productive. But of course, this would also affect interpersonal relationships and our mental health. So how do you think all of this ties in, especially when we are either forced to live in isolation alone, or if people are forced to live really close together, even with families, when we are not used to living together 24/7 all the time?
What you said is right, partly. So we have adopted a lot of behaviors which apparently seem to be automatic, but they are not so. Because we have made our habits more efficient, we tend to go on our life without actually being mindful of what we are doing, what we are not doing. So this kind of like additional time actually provides an opportunity to observe our own patterns and habits and what effect it has on our own health, the behavior, the health of our own immediate family members. So these things are very important. So the concept of mindfulness plays in here. Be it any activity, be it how you're speaking to other person, how you're doing your work, what kind of food you're choosing, how you're eating, what additional activities you're doing while eating. All these things influence the way how you are carrying out every behavior. So the more you observe, the more you know what kind of patterns you tend to adapt when you are stressed. Because most people, as Ishi also mentioned, they resort to their previously learned maladaptive habits, which they had practiced during stress. Sometime in the past, they would have had some sweet when they were stressed, or they would have had alcohol when they were stressed. So this kind of pairing takes place, which they are not aware. But once they start noticing why I am doing certain activity, which helps to kind of integrate all these experiences about what is the antecedent, what is the behavior exhibited, and what is the consequences. The simple behavioral analysis called ABC charting will help to establish the links about what activity, what is the behavior, and what is the consequence. So such observation will help an individual to know about what kind of behavior I have exhibited with my spouse or with my child and what consequence it has resulted. So being more observant, getting the help of a therapist in kind of analyzing your own behavioral patterns, and then modifying these things actually reaps benefits. Then again, regarding the highs individual chooses, all living beings have a natural tendency to get more than usual life experiences. So they certainly involve in additional activities, be it a physical activity or be it social activities, to get a sense of like to keep the reward pathway in your brain firing. So when access to these additional means are kind of prevented, they tend to choose maladaptive things. For example, easy highs, be it sugar, be it alcohol, or be it other activities which are disruptive in the long run, playing video games for prolonged duration, using mobile phones for longer duration, which give instant highs. but they are not productive either in the shorter or in the longer run. But brain perceives everything the same because finally it needs something to fire up its reward pathway. So we have to choose healthier highs, healthier things which are beneficial both in the short term and also in the long term.
What are some of these healthy highs that you would recommend?
Healthy highs like starting from meditation, spending, having some alone time. Even when you are at home, when you have children and other people around, you can play combined games. You can solve some puzzles. Then in addition, now the government has opened up, there are provisions to do isolated activities, physical activities. For example, you can go for walking, jogging, running. So all these activities will help you kind of provide the right amount of high, because you do physical activity, you get the sufficient amount of uh, activation in your reward pathway, and it is also healthier in the long run because it helps to burn calories, and exposure to outdoors is very important for sensory integration. And it is also important to orient your circadian rhythm. As Ishi was mentioning about melatonin repeatedly, it is important for you to expose your body to sunlight according to the natural rhythm, the circadian rhythm. So you have to get oriented rather than getting exposed to the screen time for a longer time, having coffee at odd hours to keep you stimulated. So instead of having coffee, you can have a simple walk. You can just do other activities. You can just sit and meditate, do some breathing exercise, which helps to de-stress rather than resorting to unhealthy activities like smoking to de-stress. You can do a simple breathing exercise for the same duration. If you smoke for 2 minutes, you can just sit, try to calm yourself, then again do some deep breathing, which will provide a relatively similar kind of relaxation uh, than unhealthy habit, say example for taking a sip of alcohol or smoking. So it's important people choose healthier alternatives than the unhealthier ones.
Is that something that you've seen a lot of? Are people taking up substances, smoking and alcohol? I do hear anecdotal stories around me about a number of people who started smoking during this pandemic who hadn't smoked before.
Fear and stress are normal reactions of individuals to any kind of uncertainty, and more so in a time like this when there is uncertainty of acquiring an infection, choosing a loved one to the infection. Then again, about unemployment, there are job losses, there are like job cuts, and even the economy is in a state of turbulence. So this is a perfect recipe for someone to experience fear, anxiety. And what do individuals do normally? They just take alcohol to sleep, they take alcohol to de-stress, they start smoking more than usual. So it is a common habit. So it is important for people to understand that these negative emotional states are going to be temporary at the best. And a simple technique called urge surfing, because we see that this kind of emotion comes in waves. You can actually observe this kind of emotional distress increasing and decreasing. So when you get more awareness of how your emotions are playing with you, how these phases of stress are behaving, if you just let it pass, you may be able to handle it when it is at its trough, rather than trying to do some other activity, smoking or having alcohol when it is at its crest. So it is important to wait, observe, and choose healthy highs rather than resorting to the automatic maladaptive habits they have been used to for a long time.
And I suppose something like journaling would also help us keep track of this, as well as doing the ABC charting that you had mentioned. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on the method?
If there is a consequence, because people tend to recognize that there is a problem, because if a spouse picks up a fight, then an individual realizes, okay, now there is something problematic. So this is the consequence. So one has to go to the antecedent. So what started this? So was there like a child shouting in the room? So that is the antecedent. And there is a behavior of the dominant person in the family who shouts at it. So that is the behavior. And what is the consequence, which leads to negative emotional reaction, both from the kid and other family members. So the chain is complete. So the individual has found that this is the antecedent: the child crying, the male shouting, and all the family members upset with him, leading to a conflict. So when the antecedent, behavior, and consequence is known, the individual can resort to a healthy habit. Rather than shouting, he could have made an attempt to pacify the kid, which would have broken up this chain of antecedent, behavior, and consequence. And the same thing about emotions. If somebody is not having sleep, so what should an individual do? Matlab, he should not resort to unhealthy habits of like having alcohol, which again would lead to further disruption in the sleep routine, and it will lead to a hangover in the next day. The consumption of alcohol in household can also increase the incidence of domestic abuse. So considering all this into keeping all this into consideration, instead of resorting to these unhealthy habits, the person can follow sleep hygiene. So what is sleep hygiene? Just say fix a waking up time, fix a sleeping time, don't sleep during daytime, then limit exposure to screen, video games, and other stimulating activities, avoid coffee in the evening. So all these activities together, when an individual adopts into his lifestyle, there will be a comfortable sleep. So with every behavior and every unhealthy behavior, you can try to track it. What is the antecedent, what is the behavior, and what is the consequence? And if you are not able to do it by yourself, we are always welcoming people who want to get guidance to monitor their behavior, do analysis, and adapt a healthier lifestyle.
And seeking professional help wherever possible is always good.
Absolutely.
I missed on touching something very important, which was addressing nutritional needs and the micronutritional status of an individual. Usually cravings and all of that, they bring about further nutritional deficiencies. And when you eat wrong, that is a consequence, and it's also a cause. So it's sort of a chicken and egg situation. But whatever it is, I think addressing optimum nutrition is important. And so I'm glad today with the pandemic, there is a focus on vitamin D and vitamin C and zinc like never before. There is, acceptance of the fact that there is a correlation with our, gut and our immunity and these nutrients. So it is important that every individual does get, either through blood checks or through under supervision, has access to taking these levels at optimum levels, and which means taking your supplements and getting diagnosed with the deficiency, or just taking the supplements under supervision. And then there are other supplements also, which means immunity boosting supplements, which include aloe vera, amla, and all of that. And we know that when a person gets a good dose of these, also it somehow modulates your eating behavior. And of course, taking adequate proteins also is important, and we've already talked about fats. And one more thing for behavior we haven't addressed is we've talked a lot about alcohol and caffeine to some extent, but hydration is extremely important. So, for a good for a good neurological function of the body, for good transmission of nerve impulses, hydration is critical. And mostly when people feel either they are not, like you said, if they haven't slept enough or they are feeling tense, the go-to drink is caffeine. So they just reach out for caffeine, which gives them immediate high, but certainly is dehydrating and has its negatives. So just moderate that and take more hydrating drinks. You can add, just a clove or a cinnamon or just some saffron or just some lemon or whatever to make that more valuable, that drink. But hydration in whatever way, cold or hot liquids, is critical to good mental functioning and stress management. And like you said, the journal is also very important to see where you stand with your food. So it's important to maintain a food diary. If somebody is genuinely wanting to work towards eating right and eating better and improving, then a food journal or a food diary is extremely valuable. So it's like literally a mirror on the wall. You don't recognize what you've eaten, but when you put it down, you realize that, my God, I have eaten that much. And then also to know your peak hunger times and your eating pattern, when you are hungriest, when you are. So it is a real valuable tool in addressing healthy eating habits. And sometimes we find that no matter what is being done, all the right things are being done. People are doing their hour or 2 hours of physical activity, eating very well, eating on time, yet the problem is not getting resolved. and the issues continue to remain, fatigue remains, energy remains poor, or sleep remains disturbed, or the anxiety or the manifestations, other manifestations of anxiety are visible. In that case, it's important to then look at the gut at a deeper level, supplement with probiotics and prebiotics, and look out for food sensitivities. Sometimes wheat sensitivity is underlying all of these issues, and if a person is wheat sensitive or gluten sensitive, then should take advice on a different level from a qualified person. Food sensitivities, particularly wheat and mental health, are now being recognized as very important parts of management now. So these are issues which need to be addressed even by mental health professionals, that the mind and the brain are connected, and actually the gut is now being called the second brain. There is so much of conversation around it.
Ms. Ishi, so we've reached the last few minutes of our discussion. I just wanted to ask you if there were 3 things that you could tell people to do going forward, knowing that the vaccine is about, let's say, 2 or 3 years away. What are 3 important lifestyle changes that people should adopt to get through, this period in a relatively sane manner, hopefully?
Starting with the first P is planning your day with respect to food, not just appointments and not your other meetings, but also what you're going to be eating the whole day. Planning when you'll be exercising, planning what supplements you're going to take when, planning when you're going to have your cereal. Cereal is basically your breads and your rotis and your carbs. So when you're going to be having that, because that is also, there is science around the fact that eating by sunset helps to, digest it better. And now we are validating that with science. So all of this is a part of planning. How much of cereal are you going to have? If you are sensitive to a certain cereal, then which one you're going to have? So planning your day around these issues is extremely important. And the second is proteins. And so proteins are critical. And everyone understands what proteins are, but ensure that at least 2 meals of the day are rich in proteins. And typically we plan our meals around cereals. So it's nice to have, to focus on whether it's plant protein or animal protein. I would say if you can reduce animal protein, it's better. But have your proteins in 2 meals and pair them with vegetables. So that's another important piece. And also, we haven't spoken about one part of the planning is peak hunger time. So don't, everyone has a time in the day when you are hungriest. So address that and don't let that just, pass away and then, I'm going to eat later, because you eat more. So it's important to know your body clock and when you want your food the most. And in any case, late night eating or post 7 eating is something which should be discouraged. Even, most people say their peak hunger time is between 5 and 7, but some of them today, which are the night bird category, they say we like to eat at 11, 12, and that's not, even if you want to eat at that time, that is not something we would encourage. And lastly is the third P is protective foods. Protective food means all the foods which we talk about as healthy, like vegetables, fruits, which literally protect us from various conditions and diseases. They have the phytonutrients which really help us to fight. And these vegetables, fruits can be taken raw or cooked. And this also includes the spices and all the the pre and the probiotics and the good fats, the nuts and the seeds and all of that, and of course water. So have at least 1 meal dedicated to vegetables and fruits, which is an important goal, which we don't do. We plan our meals around cereals all the time. So 1 meal, which is maybe a breakfast, can just be fruits and vegetable juices or nuts. And, or a lunch can just be a salad and some vegetables, or a dinner can be a soup and steamed vegetables or cooked vegetables. So it is important to address this group so that we get the adequate quantities of these phytonutrients in our system. Otherwise, we just take these vegetables and fruits as a side dish. It's like everything else is there and there's a small portion of vegetable. So in order to prevent that, it's important this is one tool you can use to work around this. So I think, these 3 Ps is a very easy way to package your food, and the cereal intake, depending on who you are, don't overeat, eat less. That's a standard rule. So if you eat better quality, it's like what I call bless: eat better, eat less, eat early, and eat slow. So chew your food
Very
well.
handy. And these are also tips that will hold strong post the pandemic also, whatever our new normal is going to be. These are still things that we should be mindful of anyway.
Unquestionably.
Dr. Srinivas, what would your 3 tips be for lifestyle changes or things that you think we should adopt so that we can face the next couple of years and then whatever comes after that?
So from a mental health perspective, I will say about 3 A's. So one is about activity scheduling. Human beings are always creatures of habit. So it is very difficult for individuals to keep changing their daily routines and making changes on a daily basis. So it is important to incorporate healthy lifestyle into an everyday plan, be it timely eating, timely exercising, and the other activities, having an alone time and also having a social time. So both should be incorporated into the daily activity scheduling. So try to maintain a consistent activity almost daily. So that you can always do journaling, chart your progress, and make incremental improvements rather than making abrupt changes. The second one is access to the right information, because now the vaccine is coming. There are going to be a lot of health advisories. There are going to be nutritional supplements, immune boosters, and there are in the market which say there is going to be like complete cure. Then even the medication lists are getting revised every day. So to make informed decisions, it is important to access the right information from credible channels, like use either the WHO website or use official applications of big professional bodies, rather than utilizing simple news articles, occasional YouTube videos, or other things which may not be very reliable. The third one is we have to approach a therapist. Whenever you have doubt, you feel that something is not right and there is a need, always approach a therapist rather than trying to heal yourself, trying to do research on a topic which specialists spend like 10 years or more to master the subject. It is always important to approach an expert rather than trying to find cure by oneself.
Yeah, I think this one is especially important these days with WebMD. We're looking at both our physical health symptoms and mental health symptoms online and self-diagnosing ourselves a lot.
Absolutely. It is important that people find information, they know about the illness, everything is good. But when trying to treat, also try to get additional information, additional examination from experts who have spent years, say 10, 20 years. So you cannot replace that information with 10, 20 minutes of online search.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is important to leave it to the professionals, gain additional information from your own exploration, but make use of the best treatment, best evidence available.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Srinivas and Ms. Ishi. This was a wonderfully insightful discussion. It did go on a lot longer than we planned, but thank you so much.